He is also a chairman at the Indian Institute of Architects, Rajasthan chapter. He is a pioneer and trendsetter in modern high-rise development for not only commercial spaces but also several innovative residential buildings, and a strong advocate of the idea of traditional sustainable wisdom in building construction. We welcome you, sir. We are delighted to have you here with us, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Let's hear it from you on your topic. Over to you.
Thank you, Radhika and Team Mythos for inviting me for this wonderful session, which I always like to, address, share my ideas about the journey of architecture, about my thinking processes, which has actually evolved in architecture last so many years of my practice. So can I have the screen sharing? So as you know, I was being briefed by the Glass Academy and those people that I need to speak something on the design thinking and architecture practice. And it's truly said, that, yeah. So if we really go by the words of Charles Burnett, he used to say that design thinking is a process of creative and critical thinking that allows information and ideas to be organized, decisions to be made, situations to be improved, and knowledge to be gained. This is all actually is involved in the design thinking when you do any piece of architecture. And if we overview that what are the different phases which are there in the process of design thinking, I think we have broadly 5 things which actually come into play: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and the test. And without this, it's very difficult to integrate the entire process, and come up with a build form which is actually being desired by the user. And if we really think in terms of design, actually it's very human-centric, which means that it uses the evidence of how the consumer or the humans rather actually engage with the product or the services. It's a process for solving problems by prioritizing the consumer's need, overview. So without the involvement, without the understanding of the user's perspective, it's very difficult, to come up with the design process. So I think this is what today we have been asked to talk about: the design thinking and architecture actually identify the problem and understand the people you are designing it for. It's not that we can design it for anyone. We have to think in terms of the user's perspective. It's about to collect the information of the problems and learn how others may have solved this problem earlier. In our terms, what we call case studies. It actually brainstorm and analyze your ideas. It develop a solution that could test out, and get feedback on into your original design. So these are the different processes, and they are very gradual. You cannot end up doing a very steep process. It's a very gradual process, which takes a lot of time, which actually requires a lot of understanding, and then finally come in solving a design problem. And I think if we actually explain it by literature, it doesn't serve our purpose. So I would just like to go through a quick run of my projects which we have designed in last 15, 20 years, that how the project has been evolved, what was the design process behind that, and how was the outcome of that. And it actually tells us that what are the different forms of architecture, in terms of modern glass building, in terms of ethnic elevations, in terms of understanding the traditional wisdom, the vernacular wisdom, in terms of creating certain high-rise dwelling units for the occupants. So it again is very subjective. You cannot come up with a solution which can be generalized, which can be it's always subjective. So in architecture, A plus B is never C. So it's always varying. So I think first I would like to just talk about my one boutique project which we designed. This is an IT building, which we always call it a fluid workspaces. The building offers a de facto space planning scheme, for the transparent work culture. And basically this was in the pink city of Jaipur, and it comprises of 600 workspaces. There was a rooftop restoration and other amenities like gym, crèche, breakout spaces, sleeping pods, and there were a few large conference halls also. And every floor has a meeting room of various size, so that there's always a proximity, from the user's perspective. If on a particular floor, someone is using a space, if whatever space he requires, maybe for a meeting, maybe for a boardroom, maybe for a presentation, it is not to go on respective lower floor. You should always have that in proximity with on the same floor. So we started with the beautiful reception area, and whosoever comes, since there was less footfall of the outsiders, of the guests, but still my client, was of the view that I need a grand, reception area, so that, whosoever enters into my building can I feel that he's entering into a big time IT building. And they were having a big boardroom, which actually, biparted. If you see, it could have been biparted as per their usage. So, and the use of materials were very simple, very, very subtle, the colors were very pastel, with proper, acoustic system, with all the gauges that supports an IT boardroom. These were the small boardrooms. The concept was the same. We had a fabric wall at the back, which actually behaves like a acoustic wall. And in the middle of it was a LED TV wall, which was actually a presentation wall. And all the materials were very simple, We do not believe in, making a conference room with a very loud design language, which actually when you are doing a meeting or a presentation, distracts you, So our idea was very, very, very clear that we always wanted a very simpler, very minimalistic, very subtle, material palette. So these were the various boardrooms, and this was the director's room. He wanted that I should always, have multiple tasks in my room. When I need to interact with my employer, I have a big table. When I need to have a one-to-one roundtable discussion, then I have a small conference in the same room. Then I need to have a very informal discussion. I need to have a lounge or a sofa sitting. So it was very clear. And if you see those louvers, behind the louvers was a very cozy and sort of a outdoor sitting, which was actually in the windows. And the respective floors, actually we tried to celebrate that with those certain vibrant colors, because our design language, as I told you, was very simple. The colors were very pastel, very subtle. We played with the gray and the white, but all of a sudden, we used the pin-up board and the fabric and some portions in the flooring as the orange color, which actually, give it a very vibrant look. And since it was basically having a lot of working women also, there was a space for a small crèche where the working women can bring their children, and so that, a work culture, a cohesive work culture can be developed. So, and this project, we completed in a time frame of 21 months with an area of 1.25 lakh square feet of area with architecture and interior support. And another, our project for which we have always been passionate, was a standalone, residential unit, which in-houses some 162 apartments. And we always call it an apartment with a living terrace. And actually, this buildings brings a lot of attention with the living terraces on each floor. And the USP was that we used to have terraces, walking terraces and very interactive terraces on each floor. And this was the basic sketch, which gives us an impetus that how to work out the form and of this. And the client was very generous enough to give us a liberty to sacrifice the FSI in these terraces, which I will explain in my next slides. And this was a perfect blend of nature and light environment of the multi-level picturesque central landscape area. Normally, whenever we talk about landscape area, we have a in back of our mind, we always think in terms of a natural create, but this time we wanted to come out of the box thinking. So we say, why not to celebrate, even on the 10th floor, 12th floor, certain terraces. So there were 165 units, which is again in the Jaipur, and this we constructed 5 years back. So this was the basic sketch, which actually, persuaded us to work out the facade of this. So there were terraces which were actually, interlinked visually, but they were segregated with the level difference. There were 2 different floors. So I get a feeling of double the amount of the area of the terrace which I have dedicatedly given on one floor with a visual link, and there was a separate, there was a visual link, but it was segregated also. And every terraces, I get a double light feel, so that it does not look very cozy because it was a 1500 square feet of space, so the double height was there. So this was the overall, the slitted portion, all the double height terraces, which were there in the front facade of the building, So it was like a common area being given to every floor owners, on that particular floor. There were around 14 flats on one floor. So we have given an ample space of around 1500 square feet. So since the land was not that big, it was almost 5,000 square meter of land. So we were not having sufficient green spaces. So it was a challenge, to me, that how to give naturally green spaces to the owners of the dwelling units. So this is what it persuaded me to create certain green space on the respective floors. And finally, we'll end up giving the club and the infinity pool for the last top 2 floors, the 10th and the 11th floors. And this is the look of the infinity pool. We're getting beautiful pictures to view, when the skyline, since the other side of the road was the low-rise flats, and only you can see one high-rise flat. So other than that, there were smaller plots. So I was not having, the threat of getting good skyscrapers or high-rise structure. So, I deliberately put this, my infinity pool in this direction. But always I get a very good horizon, and a beautiful infinity edge pool. So the terraces at all levels were intended to allow a better light and ventilation at the upper levels also. And, these are the terraces, and the total built-up area was around 22,000 square meter of area, and even the cutouts, the inner cutouts, were beautifully treated with a skylight, and these were the ventilation, certain store in the kitchen areas. And again, the actual view of the infinity pool, that there was a lot of play of light and shade on the top. The half of the pool was covered with skylight, and the rest half was open. So you can actually enjoy light and shade, even while you're swimming. This is the top view. This is the view exactly, when I get the infinity edge. This was the overall facade, The rest of the elements in the facade were very subtle, very minimalistic. And the focal point in this entire design was these double height terraces. Then, another building which actually were designed in a very record time was approximately 15,000 square meter of IT building, which were designed in a record time of 18 months. Architecture, interior, sports. Client was very smart enough to take the decision at a very faster pace, and this we actually nomenclated as the workspaces of the leisure. So we have given a lot of breakout spaces at intermediate levels, at all level, and there were a lot of green terraces. So always, whenever we do any design, our main concept is biophilic. We always wanted in the upper floor very close to the nature, very close to the green areas, very close to the outdoors. You should not never feel that you are in an indoor space and you are not enjoying any outer space. So we always think in terms of very biophilic design. So this was a green building, and we have certified it by the Gen 4 SHM gem, and the glass was very judiciously used here because we always have a fear of using glass in a climate like hot and dry climate of Jaipur, But since actually this was a not fall, so we judiciously used the glass, and there were certain breakout zones at each floor. This building was just 6 floors high. This is the inward side of the building, which is peeping up into a good landscape area, a lot of water bodies, and the entire building was air conditioned. The site was around 5,800 square meter, and it is considered to be the fastest building in the Mahindra SEZ area. And this was an American company which announced around more than 700 workstations. And this was the main entrance with landscape, on both side entrance, and this was the west facade, which you windows with a lot of louvered area, the toilet ducts were there, and we planned it in such a way that the artificial light actually reduces by 61%, and that was the best USP of this. Even the clients who are using there, the people who are working there said that actually in daytime don't need any daylight, and except for the fact when they require certain artificial light for working or in a dark room condition in their conference areas. So this was basically, this was phase one, which we completed. The other part of the site was kept open, and we replica the same thing. So this was a U-shaped building, but as of now, this has been left for green wall, green area, so that they can have the party areas and all, and a good area for social interaction. This was, my drop-off point, where, and again, the boardrooms were very simple, very subtle, very minimalistic. As I told you that whenever you design conferences and boardrooms, you always emphasize more on the acoustics, the gadgets, and the interaction among the users, so that the architectural elements and the interior elements does not proceed on to you and it distract you. So again, same philosophy. Even we try to do the same thing. We celebrated a different floor with different colors. So for example, this particular floor was with the red, So, and like if you see, there were other colors. This is the blue. So all the 6 floors we celebrated in different colors, and we try to give a lot of outdoor spaces, very informal outdoor spaces where the employees can move out during the breakout time. They can chit chat. They can sit on the stone benches. The benches is local stone. If you can see, the like Bullard pole, there are stone benches. So this was the overall concept. We try to give certain indoor spaces, the breakout zone, where they could relax from the stressful working culture. They can play snookers, they can play table tennis. Cafeteria was nicely done. Certain vibrant colors like yellow ochre, and we played with certain fluted panels on the hand wash area, certain glass, this thing, and that told different colors on different things. And if I talk in terms of the statistics, this has a very good energy performance index of 90, and that was also without the renewable energy. And almost is installed. We have renewable energy installed with total capacity of 25 kilowatt as a solar panel, and we try to save 80 kL of rainwater harvesting. It actually reduced my total potable water consumption by 42%, which was required in between building agencies. So I tell you that before I can't stop talking more on this project, because always there are certain figures which we need to control for achieving a building to be a green. But I tell you, if we holistically design any building and follow the principles of sustainability without filling the checkpoints or without filling the questionnaire of a rating agencies. Mark my friends, 90% of the buildings are more than gold-rated buildings. If we follow the guidelines of MOU of Environmental Clearance Department, if we follow the guidelines of local building bylaws, most of the buildings are green. I think what we lack is the compliance part. We sometimes forego the statistical part of an built form, and finally, since we architects are very bad in statistics, so we never try to compute it. We always try to do the energy conservation, the green building concept by passive measure. But when you do a very urban building like this, with a lot of 100%, which is actually 100% air-conditioned building, there are certain things, which you need to trust upon the statistics, And for that, we need to have our engineer friend who can help you out, to calculate the overall calculations, and come out with a figure that actually saves your building's energy, which is very important. And as we all know that, if we see the total energy consumption in any industry, building industry, consume more than 40%. So being an architect, it really synthesize our issue that we sensitize our issue that we should be very careful about the facts and the figures, and we should try. And whenever we are erecting an urban structure, a very urban design, so where usage of glass is there, usage of gadgets are there, pumps are there, so we have to be very careful while working out the entire thing. So the selection of the products has to be very important. The WWR has to be the wall window ratio. It's not that if you need to use glass, just use glass wherever needed, So there has to be proper wall window ratio. There has to be a proper orientation of the building. There has to be a proper selection of the air conditioning units. There has to be a proper sun shading devices. There has to be a proper address to the rainwater harvesting, to the storm water, that we normally tend to waste. So these are certain things which we should keep in mind, while designing any building. So again, I'll come up with one of my prestigious, residential building, which is with multiple floors. It's a low, not very high rise. It's 7-8 floors high building, just bang up at the Jaipur airport, and this is basically a very premium, ultra lux residential apartment with a huge ticket size. Each flat is, not less than 6,000, 7,000 square feet, with a feel of a villa. And it's, I always call it a sky villa. So I always call it it's an epitome of luxury, where the building breaks all the barriers to achieve the highest level of luxury. And each flat is costing more than 10 CR. So it gives, it connected the roots to the rich and the historical, language, architectural language also, and the elevation designs also. So, and the name of the project is mentioned Royal. So, and the site is, as I told you, bang opposite the Jaipur airport. This plan with the maximum that the owners, of the house occupants can enjoy the maximum view of the runway. And there were big terraces, and all the flats are duplex. As I told you, the orientation of the block is designed in such a way that they are mutually, supporting to acting as a shading, elements to each other. So this is the front side, which is less in the width, a very clear neoclassical design language, which was the requirement of my client in order to celebrate the royalty, at the footstep of the house owner. So we celebrated with the good order, the pediments, the brackets, and the dead wall and the stucco padlock, wall finishes, which with the high orders, So this is the view from the airport side. The next to is, which is a integral part of this property, is the Taj Jaipur coming on. So it's a 250 each 5-star hotel, which is coming adjacent to this property. And the design language is very harmonized with the hotel as well as the residential part. and it has become one of the luxurious project of Jaipur. So this is my preview, and these are the elements, the entrance, it's a center guard room with entry and exit on both sides, beautiful Charlie work, which are showcasing and enhancing the entrance. And the best part of this is it has got the longest pool in any residential area. The pool length is almost 40 meters, and it's a lot of floating cabanas coming on the pool, both the side, the deck area, and it's all over the pool. A lot of, as I told you, that even the deck area and half the pool area is being shaded in the top with the skylight, which gives you a very good feel of light and shadow. So you enjoy light and shadow and the openness in the pool also. So this is my view from one of the hanging. A lot of jolly rows have been used. So wherever I need to hide away my toilet ventilators, we have given very beautiful jolly carved out of the local stone here. And the remains, the orders, all the ornamental work has been done in GRC. We just did the structure, plain structure, and the entire thing we have created with this, the GRC work. These are the interiors of the flat, and all the flats are duplex with an area of 7,000 square feet, So this is the feel of the flat. It does not like look like a flat. It actually looks like a villa, based on the top floors of a residential area. The design, which we tried to do with the furniture, and actually we didn't get it fabricated. We imported it from Italy. So the home theater, the washrooms, very subtle pastel tiles, the living room area, dining area, all with VR system of air conditioning. Even if you see material here is, these are royal materials, but the wall finishes and all they have been done in a very subtle manner, very minimalistic design. So the colors of the furniture, the pastel colors, were allowed to speak loudly to celebrate the spaces. But other than that, all the spaces were very subtle. The finishes were very subtle. And this is our another, prestigious project which we call it's going to be the temple and the cultural center, and we always call it a new age temple. It's just not a temple; it's a cultural center. The building, redefine the temple architecture and relates it to the story of modern Hare Krishna movement. And since it's an ISKCON temple, and my client were very particular about using the glass facade in a temple, which was very challenging for us. And this is going to be the second tallest building, the second tallest temple in the country after Vrindavan, ISKCON temple. So, it was total area was around 3.5 lakh square feet of area, and Hare Krishna centers have been revolutionary worldwide. People from all walks of life have joined the movement, and devotees have made it a mass movement. This change is also seen in the building, if you see, where the worship, the glass and the modern materials have been the path breaking, breaking adoption into these buildings. Because glass and building normally does not gel, but we tried our best to build. So this is a bit distorted view, I suppose. I'm not coming this view. The total height of the building is 73 meters. The shikhar, which is a glass shikhar, is of 30 meters high. So we always call it a new age temple. The shikhar was, a blend of the modern design language and the traditional design language. It's a good blend of modern traditional design language. And the glass which you see actually acts as solar panels, which helps me in generating the energy. And the best part is that the client didn't have a requirement of creating such a big shikhar, but then we give them the idea that why not the top portion of the shikhar, which is about 30 meters from the terrace level, can be used for that Dwajarohan, which we call in Hindu mythology. So it can be a good religious ritual, that you just wave the flags, at the top of the shikhar. So that inside the shikhar, there was a lift core and the stair core which is going on, and this act as the shikhar, the void, the shikhar enables the air to travel within the building, and this actually, act as a light well for the better interior also. So if I am standing on the temple floor, that is on the second, third floor, I see a beautiful, play of light and shade, because of this glass and the solar panel. So these are the two shikhars, The last two habitable spaces were equal, otherwise every spaces was air conditioned. And the thin facade in the shikhar actually defines the temple architecture. And the solar panels were on the southern side, to generate the electricity. And this total height is 73 meters, as I told you. And the temple floor, actually, the plinth level starts at a level of plus 10 meters. So there's a beautiful stair, stairs with beautiful mid landing, beautiful water bodies, intermediate water bodies, which takes you to a level of plus 10 meters. So this again is a energy efficient building, and it has been certified as the gold LEED rated building with WWR volume ratio of 23%, and most green building concepts here, since we've already been certified as a green building for this. And the energy saving in this project is, as the statistics give me, 17.25%, and the standard energy consumption is 45 lakhs 21,000 kilowatt, and we have reduced it by to 37 lakh 41,000 kilowatt, almost 17.5% of the energy used by the judicious use of the glass, of the building materials, of the gadgets, pumps, the air conditioning units. So these are, when we try to get the site at the local level. So we did most of this cast and sheet construction there, and try to create certain modules for the jolly work that we did, because the site of the scale was too big. We cannot afford to have both from commercial perspective and from time perspective, the stone jolly work, So we tried to create certain modules, dies, the concrete, and we tried to get certain jollies from concrete. So the traditional element which we do casting at the site, So this is my another low-rise building. It is again bang opposite to Jaipur Airport. This is residential building, low-rise residential building with multiple towers. I got 9, 10 towers because each floor is getting to 4 floors or 4 flats, and I call it comfort home. The building is a very seamless blend of a unique design pattern, very convenient design language, very simple, very straight lines, very subtle, and the total number of units are 352. This is my overall dense site plan, which lot of, since I was having a constraint of height, I cannot go more than 14 meters. So I just created ground plus 3 structure. So beautiful, landscape, podium area in between, and surrounding was the parking, peripheral parking, and these are the different blocks. And this was the design. Very simple. The structural elements were my, elevational elements. I didn't create a single, I didn't erect a single inch of masonry, which actually added to my elevation. I didn't pour a single cubic meter of RCC, which added to my elevation. Whatever was my structural, this thing, except for these headers, where I need to have certain, header on the top. So this was the design language. Very simple, subtle, straight lines, broken. This thing. Again, there was a indoor, outdoor, indoor, all with a pool, inside the building, which was in the basement. Now, this is my another urban upscale urban scale project, which is going to be a green building. We just started this construction. It's 62 meters high mixed use building, and the lower two, three floors were the commercials, retails, and the rest floors residential. Again, it's in the prime area of Jaipur. So, as I told you, three floors, were the commercial, and the fourth floor was the club area, basically, which we tried to, eat away the area and try to subtract certain mass so that it breaks the monotony and it's created clear-cut differentiation between the commercial and the residential area. So, there's a certain landscape. Yeah. And it's very difficult to create, whenever you do urban projects, it happens most of the time that you always, struggle with the green area. So we have developed a style, that whenever we do like this green area is about the commercial area. So we always try to celebrate our green areas wherever we have got a constraint of our green spread area on the grade, So we always try to celebrate it on the higher part of the building. So it actually gives you a feeling that in spite of being on the higher floor, you are not very far from the nature, you are very close to nature. And this is the essence of biophilic design. So now next project, and because of certain NDA non-disclosure agreement with the clients, I cannot explain it much, but it's going to be a very iconic project, which will come the city of Ajmer. I'm just going to show you just one slide for this project. This is, this is a twin tower. The towers are twisting, and the entire floors are different in planning. So it's all the floors are twisting, and then finally adding to a form, and then both these are being connected to the top level through a bridge, which actually is my banquet area on the top. So it is yet to start. This is another very ethnic architecture which we did around 15 years back, and this was in the bias city of Salasar. And the building uses the detailed modified from the typical Rajasthan architecture to suit the authenticity of its place in culture. Since it was in the bias city, I say, my design language was very local, very earthy, very ethnic, with a lot of typical Rajasthani Jarukar, which are the highlights of the Shekhawati architecture, small openings, not very big glass, which actually adheres to the local climate of hot and dry local climate of Rajasthan. And the best structure in this entire build form was the Yagdishala, which he created. It was a beautiful, semi-open Yagdishala, which was not being conditioned, air conditioned with any means, nor it was air cooled. Even if you are sitting in the ambient temperature of 45 degrees, when you sit in the middle or in between, you never feel that you need even a fan. The air flows in such a way, even the rendition of this building was well placed. Plus, there is a skylight on the top, where the hot air travels from the top, and since the Yagya Shala was in the center, so whenever the hot air of the Yagya or the Havan travels, and it actually does not pollute the surrounding. Everywhere there's a steps finally coming. So whenever there is a big gathering of around 200 people, so it's not that there is a chronology being followed with the setting system. Everyone can peep in from any direction. This was top skylight which I was talking about. So last project which I'm going to talk about is the green and the Greek. This project we are doing in Congo, the city of Kinshasa, and again the same constraint with architect which I used to have, that my density was too much, so it was a big project of 1.5 million square feet of area. So again, green spaces were celebrated on the higher floors area. The first 2, 3 floors in the front was the commercial area, and the back was the residential area. So again, my green area actually started at a height of 12 meters, and above that were my residential floors. So the architecture, and we tried to adhere all the principles of green. This was the overall the podium view where we announced the swimming pool, the tennis court, the basket, the futsal, which is a prominent game in Africa. It's a small ground for football. So we tried to create a design language. We wanted a very royal design language. Even the header of the build form was done with the stones. This again at the plus 12-meter level. Try to give this pool in the green area, the sports amenities. So I think the reason I showed you all this variety of varied designs was so that how the design thinking evolved at a time when you do a building which is actually ethnic in nature, which is being inspired by the vernacular architecture, and at the same time we have been given the assignment to erect a glass building wherein looks the client's requirement looks very urban. So I think by using design thinking, we make decisions based on what future customers actually really want, instead of relying only on the historical data and making risky bits based on the instinct instead of the evidence. So I think instinct and evidence are the two things which need to be understood in a very balanced manner. And when you do variety of job with different design language, a lot of responsibility lies on you as an architect, and always you are in a phase of learning. This is what I do while doing any design and build form. I first become a good student. I become a good learner. That whatever job which has been assigned to me with certain constraints set by my client, I'll always try to learn that what has been in the past, done on such structures, and what are the plus points and what are the negative points, what are the pros, what are the cons, of that building, and you always learn my history. So it's all about my project. I think be the change you want to see in this building, go green, and respect your Mother Earth, nature, come on, powerful design. So thank you. That's all from my side. Thanks.
Thank you for such an informative presentation, sir. It was interesting to note that the thought process that goes into a design and that brings it to life. And it was interesting to see how your designs are not only responding to your client's needs, but also to the cultural, social, and environmental context of that place. And like how the glass redefines an architectural style, like the use of glass on a temple figure. That is one modern interpretation of a cultural setting. I am sure our viewers must have learned a lot from the presentation, and as a result, must be curious to know more. I myself included, and I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you a few questions. Like, what are the important elements in design thinking? For example, what are the questions you ask yourself and try to answer during the design process? Like, I remember you said, rather than relying on the historic data, you try to ask what a user really wants. So can you share some of those questions you ask yourself and try to answer?
I think, Radhika, whenever we have been given a task, let me tell you very frankly, we architects, the architects who do not actually do very meaningful practice, we do commercial practice, let me tell you very frankly. So always we are there with the set constraints, with the client. Client come up with a very strong design brief. And our job is to, exploit the land in terms of its design brief. So whenever I personally start, I always think in terms of 3W, what, why, and when. So it holds good for every element of architecture. What is that? What to build? What to build? Then why to build? That gives me an answer for whom to build. I have to, as I mentioned in my slides, I have to be a user whenever I am designing a building. I have to see from a user's perspective. Until unless I do not become a user, I cannot do justice in designing that building. So you have to be, many a times I have got my own intuitions, own, I conceive my piece of architecture in a different fashion. But then I really try to understand that I have to be, very impartial in imposing my design understanding to my client or to my user, but I have to think in terms of the design's perspective, the client's perspective, which is very important. So I think for any architecture, for any build form, the important thing is the user.
Definitely. That is very interesting thought process. I think this is where, empathy also comes into the design process. So, can you share something about, according to you, what is the role of empathy in design research, and how does empathy shape the overall design? How do you integrate it in your practice?
See, empathy, I always, it's a synonym of compassion, basically.
Right.
So, until unless, I'll explain in a very, whenever two human beings club together, maybe for a marriage, maybe for a business partnership, until unless there is a compatibility, there is a compassioness, there is a understanding, there is a, there is a, what we say, same matching of the same wavelength, does not happen, the things does not work out. May it be business, or may it be marriage, or may it be anything, Same holds good for architecture also. So whenever you have been asked to design a design, if you are not being empathetic to design that design, you will not come up with a solution. You have to go to the depth of the feelings, depth of the climatic condition, the depth of the local culture, the depth of the local materials. So you have to develop a compassionate with everything that is being involved in the design, right from the user to the material to the technology to the client, and of course to the finance, the commercial part of it. So
right.
It works. So it's a word on a very broad spectrum, and design has to be empathetic.
Right, agreed. And while we are talking about the kind of research and the empathy in design, we would like to know more about what kind of research usually goes into determining the facade design of your projects. Like we saw some examples in the presentation as well. So is there any specific parameter or factor that goes into deciding?
I tell you, an architect is always a learner.
Right.
I'm also a student, And frankly speaking, if in working out the modern materials, frankly speaking, I being an architect do not do any R&D. I do R&D in terms of the passive design measures. I do R&D in terms of, but when it comes to the technology, I do not do any R&D. So the people who do R&D, the stakeholders in this industry who actually come with a solution, so I need to be educated by them. So education in working out any modern facade is very important. You need to be very updated. You always need to be a good student, You always need to understand to accept the new innovations in the design. So if you are doing any vernacular, any architecture inspired by a vernacular architecture, it becomes easy for you because your ancestors, your forefathers has given that your legacy, and you try to follow it with certain wit and try to adopt those principles. But when it comes to the urban and the modern architecture, until unless you are not a good student by the manufacturers, by the industrialists, the people who R&D people, the MEP consultants who actually work on the statistics. Because as I told in my presentation, we architects are very bad in what statistics. We do not understand statistics. So when it comes to figure, we used to respect our partners, engineer partners, who actually teach them about the division. If I say glass, I always used to talk to my people who are from the glass industry that there was a time when glass was a product, but now glass is a solution. It's,
Right.
glass is not a product, it's a solution. You need to know which glass, what glass to use when and where. So you have to be a good student, which I am.
Definitely, sir. So while we're talking about glass, we have also seen very thoughtful and innovative uses of glass in your project. Some, which have already interpreted like the cultural setting, as I said. So, like, what are the parameters that help you decide which type of glass should be used in which project? For example, like, how are the ones used for skylight different from that of a facade? Or like, how was the glass used in the temple sticker was different from the ones being used in high rise or like, all those settings?
See, glass, if I talk, I told you it's not a product, it's a solution. So glass come with various transformation, right from the
Right.
raw material of silica and other materials which I do not understand properly, whenever they mix and finally pass it through a furnace of 1700 degree and then finally with a fluid glass, then you do various processing onto it, various coating onto it. So then it transforms. So this transformation of glass should be well understandable to me. So if I'm using any particular glass, for example, in a facade, which is a south side facade, I need to understand the U value of that glass. I need to understand whether it is a high performance glass, how smartly it is reflecting the solar light, I need to, whenever I'm on the, as I showed you my airport site project, a lot of sound traveling for the takeoff and the landing of the aircraft. So it's a huge decibels of sound. I have to be very judicious that it has to be DU, well accosted glass, when it comes to skylight. If I want a really clear glass, so I want there should be a lot of clarity in the glass without any coating, So it's very subjective, You rightly said, that your understanding about this glass, should be very wide. If you are using in the horizontal way, the vertical way, the cladding, in the facade, in the skylight, you have to be very much updated. And this is what I told. I have to be a good learner always.
Definitely. That was indeed very insightful, sir. So, like, on behalf of all of us at Glass Academy and ethos, I would like to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much and all the best.